It was a sweltering July afternoon, the kind where the air hung heavy and thick, promising thunder, and my anger felt just as dense. I'm Eleanor, and at 28 years old, I thought I'd finally learned to navigate the treacherous waters of family. Gatherings, especially when my brother-in-law, Mark, was present. But today, he wasn't just a shark. He was a great white, circling, ready for the kill. He cornered me by the drink's cooler, a sly smirk already playing on his lips before he even opened his mouth, and I knew with a sinking dread that the usual condescension was about to escalate into something far uglier. His voice cut through the cheerful barbecue chatter, sharp and deliberately loud, designed to carry across the patio to every ear eager for drama. "Still designing those little doodles, Elle?" He sneered, waving a dismissive hand. "You know, actual businesses need real strategists, not art projects." His gaze swept over my casual summer dress, then back to my face, his eyes glinting with a smug superiority that made my blood boil. It wasn't just an insult. It was a public execution of my ambition, a calculated effort to belittle every ounce of effort and passion I poured into my graphic design firm. I felt the heat rising in my face, a flush that had nothing to do with the summer sun. My hands clenched at my sides, my nails digging into my palms as I fought to control the tremor in my voice. "My doodles, Mark," I countered, my words laced with a dangerous calm that belied the storm brewing inside me, are what successful businesses pay top dollar for. They build brands, create identities, and actually help companies connect with their audience. It's more than just pushing spreadsheets around all day. The last barb was out before I could stop it, a direct hit at his perceived glamorous corporate life. His smirk twisted into a sneer, and he stepped closer, invading my personal space, his breath reeking faintly of beer and triumph. "Oh, little feisty today, aren't we, Eleanor? Did your little boutique agency finally land a client bigger than a local dog groomer?" He laughed, a harsh, grating sound that felt like sandpaper against my already frayed nerves. "Look, I get it. Not everyone can handle the big leagues. But don't pretend your arts and crafts club is on the same playing field as real corporate power. We're talking millions, Al, millions." That was it. The red haze descended. My carefully constructed composure shattered into 1,000 pieces. I pushed past him, my shoulder deliberately bumping his, and spun around, my voice rising to match his cruel volume. "You think you're so smart, don't you, Mark? You think flashing a corporate credit card makes you superior to everyone who actually creates something, who built something from the ground up with integrity and passion, not just greed." My chest heaved, my breath coming in ragged gasps. And I didn't care who heard. "What I do," I continued, pointing a trembling finger at his chest, "has real value. It has meaning. It's not just about chasing quarterly bonuses and stabbing your colleagues in the back. You wouldn't know genuine passion if it hit you in the face because you're too busy staring at your own reflection, convinced you're the smartest man in the room." The venom in my voice surprised even me, but it felt good, a raw, unfiltered release of years of simmering resentment. The barbecue had gone silent. Every eye was on us. This wasn't just an argument anymore. It was an open declaration of war. My voice, raw with fury, hung in the heavy summer air. Mark, for once, seemed genuinely taken aback, his smug expression replaced by a flash of genuine anger. He probably wasn't used to me, Eleanor, the quiet creative, actually fighting back, especially not in front of the whole family. But this wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of thinly veiled insults, of him systematically chipping away at my confidence, always with that sneer, always with that implication that my work was less than his, that I was less than him. It started subtly when Mark first entered our family. Sarah, my older sister, was head over heels, blinded by his charm and the promise of his big city life. He was a junior sales executive then, full of ambition, and I, fresh out of university, was just beginning to build my own design business from my small spare room. He'd offer helpful advice, always tinged with a dismissive tone, about how I should get a real job with benefits instead of playing around with Photoshop. He genuinely seemed to believe he was guiding me, but it always felt like a judgment. The real shift in his attitude, the one that hardened into outright contempt, came about 2 years ago. I landed a big contract, my biggest yet, with a growing tech startup called Innovate Next. They were still small, but their vision was massive, and their CEO, a sharp woman named Enwei Chen, truly believed in the power of good design. We were building their entire brand identity from the ground up, a project that took months of late nights and endless revisions. But it was the most creatively fulfilling work I'd ever done. Mark, of course, scoffed at the news. Innovate Next? Never heard of them, Al. Probably another one of those trendy little startups that'll be gone in 6 months. He was knee-deep in his role as a regional sales director for Synergy Solutions, a corporate behemoth that to him represented the pinnacle of success. He couldn't fathom how a small, unknown company, even one with groundbreaking ideas, could ever compete with the established giants like his own. He'd often complain about the pressure at his job, the backstabbing, the impossible sales targets. But he always followed it up with how that's just how the real world works. Eleanor. Not like your little dream factory. He truly believed that his stress and cutthroat environment made his work inherently more valuable, more real. He even tried to poach one of my freelance web developers once, offering her a stable corporate future, doing internal IT work, but she laughed him off, saying she preferred working on projects that actually excited her. The constant belittling had taken its toll, chipping away at my self-worth despite my successes. I often wondered if Sarah truly saw how much he put me down, or if she just wrote it off as Mark being Mark. But as I stood there watching him, now utterly speechless for once, a new cool clarity settled over me. He had no idea how deeply my little doodles were about to shake his perfect corporate world. He had no idea what was quietly brewing beneath the surface of my insignificant life. The shock of our shouting match at the barbecue slowly faded, replaced by the awkward hum of family trying to pretend nothing had happened. Mark eventually retreated, muttering something about needing another beer, but his usual swagger was gone, replaced by a subtle, simmering resentment. I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and a quiet triumph. I had finally stood my ground, but the air still felt charged, like the calm before a bigger storm. What I didn't know then was just how close that storm was, or how deeply Mark had already, unknowingly, entangled himself in its path. A few weeks after the barbecue, I got a frantic call from Charlotte, a graphic designer I'd known since college. She'd recently started working as a freelancer for Mark's company, Synergy Solutions, mostly doing internal presentations. She sounded completely rattled, whispering so low I could barely hear her. "Eleanor," she'd hissed, "I overheard something big." Mark was talking to a colleague, Ryan. They were so sure no one was listening, but I was just around the corner, grabbing coffee. Her voice trembled with urgency. Charlotte went on, explaining how she'd heard Mark and Ryan discussing a major client presentation. Mark had been boasting about a huge new deal Synergy Solutions was about to close, one he claimed would put their company on the map. But then Charlotte said Ryan mentioned something odd. He said something like, "Just make sure Miss Chun doesn't get wind of this. She's been asking a lot of questions about our financials, especially our long-term liabilities." The name Miss Chun hit me like a jolt. Emily Chun, my client. My mind raced, connecting the dots. Emily had mentioned to me a few times that Innovate Next was looking to expand, possibly through strategic acquisitions. She was always incredibly discreet, but she'd emphasize the importance of understanding a company's true financial health, not just its public-facing numbers. Could it be? Could Mark's untouchable corporate giant be the target of Emily's quiet strategic moves? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, a dizzying mix of disbelief and a strange sense of impending justice. Charlotte continued, her voice still low and hurried. Mark got really agitated when Ryan brought up Miss Chen. He said, "She's a prying little upstart. Just focus on getting this deal done before she starts digging deeper into our books." "We don't need any complications." The words confirmed my suspicion. Mark, in his arrogance, was clearly trying to push through a deal, perhaps even a risky one, before Emily could truly scrutinize Synergy Solutions. He was operating in the dark, believing himself untouchable, while the very person he dismissed was quietly, meticulously circling him. I hung up with Charlotte, my heart pounding. This wasn't just corporate maneuvering. This felt like a ticking time bomb. Mark was so focused on his own perceived power, his own big leagues, that he was completely blind to the silent strategic force aligning against him. He was about to walk headfirst into a trap set by the very upstart he ridiculed. And I, the doodle designer, was one of the few people who could see it coming. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to get truly dangerous for him. The phone call with Charlotte had ripped away the last thread of peace I had. The casual antagonism from Mark had morphed into something far more dangerous. He wasn't just mocking M.E. He was playing a high-stakes game that could blow up in his face and possibly take others down with him. The thought of Emily Chen, so meticulous and strategic, closing in on a company that was seemingly trying to hide its true financial state, sent a cold shiver down my spine. I paced my office for hours, the hum of my computer a dull backdrop to the frantic churn of my thoughts. The more I thought about it, the more details clicked into place. Mark's constant stress, his desperate need to prove Synergy Solutions was thriving. Even his obsession with that huge new contract he kept bragging about, it all suddenly looked less like ambition and more like a frantic attempt to cover something up. He always made everything sound so perfect, so untouchable, but if Emily Chen was sniffing around their books, there had to be something truly wrong. It was a classic case of someone overcompensating, projecting an image of power to hide deep-seated insecurities. Then, a few days later, the cracks really started to show. Sarah called me, her voice tight with worry. Mark had been acting strangely, she said, snapping at her, pacing the house late at night, constantly on the phone, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. He even canceled a planned weekend trip, claiming an urgent work crisis had come up. "He's never been like this, Elle," she confessed, a note of desperation in her voice. "He's usually so in control, but he seems genuinely terrified of something, though he won't tell me what." My heart ached for Sarah. She was caught in the middle, loving her husband, but clearly seeing the strain, the fear he couldn't hide. It was clear Mark was being pushed to his absolute limits, and the pressure was breaking him. He'd always prided himself on his unflappable demeanor, his ability to handle any corporate challenge, but now he was unraveling. The man who'd stood so tall, so arrogant, at the barbecue was now a shadow, consumed by an invisible dread. The all-is-lost moment for him wasn't a sudden event, but a slow, agonizing realization. He was cornered, trapped by his own hubris, and perhaps by decisions he'd made to prop up a failing image. He probably thought he could outsmart anyone, including Emily Chen, but he'd gravely underestimated her quiet intelligence and relentless thoroughness. He had built his world on a shaky foundation, and now it was threatening to collapse around him. The ultimate irony was that the person he had belittled, the doodle designer, me, was probably the only one who genuinely understood the true nature of the threat he faced. I had seen Emily Chun's strategic brilliance firsthand, her ability to dissect a company and expose its weaknesses. And Mark, in his arrogance, had ignored all the signs, all the warnings, convinced that his corporate world was impenetrable. Little did he know, the ground beneath his feet was about to give way entirely. The tension in the air felt like a coiled spring ready to snap. Mark was crumbling. Sarah was worried sick, and I was caught in the middle of a corporate drama I never asked for. I knew Emily Chen was thorough, but the depth of Mark's fear told me there was something more than just bad finances at Synergy Solutions. It was clear he wasn't just worried about losing his job. He was terrified of what she might uncover. That kind of fear goes deeper than just numbers on a balance sheet. I kept thinking about Charlotte's phone call, about Mark and Ryan's hushed conversation. Just make sure Miss Chen doesn't get wind of this. She's been asking a lot of questions about our financials, especially our long-term liabilities. Why would they be so desperate to hide something if it was just standard corporate debt? Something didn't sit right. It felt like a missing piece, a puzzle I was unknowingly solving, bit by painful bit. Then, a few days later, the real bombshell dropped. It wasn't Mark who called me this time. It was Emily. Her voice was calm, professional, but with an underlying grit of serious purpose. "Eleanor," she began, without preamble, "I need to speak with you urgently. It's about Synergy Solutions." My heart leaped into my throat. This was it. The moment I knew was coming, but had no idea how it would actually play out. She didn't waste time with small talk. Innovate Next has completed its acquisition of Synergy Solutions. The deal was finalized this morning. My jaw dropped. It had happened. The company Mark had spent years propping up, the one he considered the pinnacle of corporate success, was now under Emily's command. The irony was almost unbearable. But then she added something that truly made the world tilt on its axis. During our due diligence, Emily continued, her voice hardening slightly, we discovered some serious accounting irregularities. It appears certain liabilities were deliberately obscured, perhaps even moved off the books entirely, to make the company look more attractive for acquisition. My breath hitched. This wasn't just poor management. This sounded like fraud. We're talking about potentially illegal practices, Eleanor, designed to inflate their value and mislead potential buyers. And the person who signed off on many of these misleading financial reports, who actively pushed for the acquisition despite knowing the true state of their books, was the regional sales director, Mark, she stated, her voice devoid of emotion. Just stating a fact. He was pivotal in presenting a false image of the company's health. He truly believed he could pull it off. Even tried to rush the deal through before our final review processes could catch it. It was the ultimate betrayal. Not by a friend, but by a system, by a man driven by ego and a desperate need for success at any cost. This wasn't just a plot twist. It was a devastating revelation that changed everything, placing Mark directly in the crosshairs of a very serious investigation. The revelation from Emily hit me hard, colder than any air conditioning could be. It wasn't just about Mark losing his job anymore. This was serious. Illegal practices, misleading financial reports, these weren't just corporate buzzwords. They were accusations that could destroy a man's life and not just his career. My initial shock slowly gave way to a churning dread. Could Mark really have been involved in something so reckless, so potentially criminal? The arrogant brother-in-law I knew suddenly seemed far more complicated and far more desperate. I called Sarah immediately, my voice tight with an urgency that even she picked up on. "Sarah," I started, trying to keep my voice calm. "I just heard something about Mark and Synergy Solutions. It's bigger than just the acquisition." I explained carefully what Emily had told me, watching as the color drained from Sarah's face with each word. Her initial reaction was disbelief. then anger, a fierce protectiveness for her husband, despite his flaws. No, Eleanor. Mark would never do something illegal. He's ambitious, yes, but not a criminal. Her denial was sharp, fueled by panic and fear for her family. But as I laid out the details, the specific mention of Mark's name by Emily, the deliberate obscuring of liabilities, I could hear her conviction waver. The anger in her voice slowly gave way to a shaky uncertainty. This wasn't just office politics or a bad sales quarter. This was a direct accusation of serious misconduct coming from the new owner of the very company he worked for. But what does this mean? Sarah finally whispered, her voice barely audible. Will he ... will he go to jail? We just had the baby, Eleanor. We can't lose everything. The raw desperation in her voice tore at me. This wasn't just about Mark facing consequences. It was about the ripple effect on their innocent family. The loyal friend, in this case, my own sister, was facing a harsh reality about the man she married. I found myself in a strange position. The person Mark had publicly humiliated was now the one holding crucial, damaging information about him. I was the underdog who, through no direct action of my own, suddenly found myself with unexpected leverage. Mark's downfall wasn't a moment of instant karma. It was the slow, painful unfolding of consequences he himself had set in motion, now, exposed by the meticulous work of Emily Chen. The next call came from Mark himself late that night. His voice was completely stripped of its usual confidence, replaced by a desperate, guttural sound I barely recognized. Eleanor, he choked out, Emily Chen just called me. She knows everything. She knows about the numbers, the hidden debt. She said I have a meeting first thing tomorrow. And if I don't come clean, she's going straight to the authorities. She said she has proof. His words hung in the air, a chilling confirmation of the inevitable. The reckoning had truly begun. The phone felt heavy in my hand, Emily's words echoing in my mind, potentially illegal practices, and Mark was pivotal. The man who had mocked my doodles was now facing a devastating legal and financial storm. One he had brought upon himself. My stomach churned. A mix of grim satisfaction and an unsettling worry for Sarah and the baby. This wasn't just a career setback. This was a life-altering disaster. I didn't have to wait long for the other shoe to drop. The next morning, my phone rang again, but this time it was Sarah. Her voice was raw, choked with tears, barely audible. Through her sobs, Eleanor, she gasped, it's Mark. He got a call from Mr. Henderson, his boss. He told him about Emily, about the investigation. He said Mark is suspended, effective immediately, pending an internal review, and the police might be involved. My blood ran cold. The police. I rushed to their house, finding Sarah pale and shaking, clutching a crying baby. Mark was nowhere in sight. He just left, she sobbed. He screamed that his life was over. He said he had to fix it, that he couldn't lose everything. A wave of fear washed over me. Mark, cornered and desperate, was an unpredictable force. He'd always been about control, about projecting success, and now all of that was crumbling around him. Suddenly, my phone vibrated. It was a text from an unknown number. Eleanor. Meet me at the old coffee shop by the park. Now, it's important. Don't tell anyone. My heart hammered against my ribs. It had to be Mark. This was the final confrontation, the unraveling. I knew this could be dangerous, but I also knew I had to go. I had to see this through, not just for myself, but for Sarah and for the truth. As I walked into the coffee shop, there he was, slouched in a booth in the corner, his face ashen, eyes sunken. The arrogant, self-assured Mark was gone, replaced by a shell of a man. Eleanor, he rasped, his voice hoarse. You knew, didn't you? You knew what Emily was doing. You knew what was coming. His voice was accusatory, but there was also a hint of desperate pleading, a man drowning and clutching at any straw. Mark, I said, my voice steady. I knew Emily Chun was thorough. I knew she valued integrity. And I knew you were making some reckless choices. He flinched, then slammed his fist on the table. I did what I had to do, Eleanor. They were going under. I just bought us time. I tried to save the company. His justification was pathetic, a desperate attempt to cling to some shred of dignity. But you lied, Mark, I countered, my voice firm. You risked everything, not just for the company, but for your family, for your own ego. The truth hung heavy between us, undeniable and devastating. The coffee shop meeting with Mark, that raw, desperate confession was the last time I saw the old Mark, not the arrogant bully, but the broken man who finally admitted his desperate, ego-driven mistakes. The days that followed were a blur of legal calls, grim-faced visits from lawyers, and the agonizing wait for news. Emily Chun, true to her word, pursued the truth relentlessly. She wasn't vindictive, she wanted to clean house, too. Ensure Innovate Synergy started on a foundation of honesty. Mark faced severe consequences. He wasn't jailed. But the financial penalties were massive, designed to strip away any ill-gotten gains and to deter others. He lost his job. His savings were depleted by legal fees and the grand house they lived, and had to be sold. It was a brutal public humiliation played out not just within our family, but in the local business news. He was the poster child for corporate arrogance and the devastating fall that follows. He became the victim who, ironically, found strength in his forced humility. Sarah, my sister, stood by him, battered but unbroken. It was hard, unimaginably. Hard, but she showed a resilience I never knew she possessed. She started working again, picking up freelance jobs, quietly rebuilding their lives. She never stopped loving Mark, but her eyes were wide open now, seeing him and the world. With a newfound clarity, she became the loyal friend, not to Mark's ego, but to the reality of their shared life. As for me, Eleanor, my little design, firm, thrived. Innovate Next, now Innovate Synergy, became my biggest client, trusting my expertise and vision. Emily Chun, my wise mentor figure, often brought me in on high-level strategy discussions, valuing my perspective precisely because it was outside the traditional corporate box. My doodles were now shaping the future of a major corporation. A satisfying, ironic twist. The biggest lesson here, the one that echoed loudest in my heart, was simple. Never underestimate the quiet power of integrity, and never mock someone's passion just because it doesn't fit your definition of success. Mark learned painfully that genuine value isn't measured in inflated balance sheets or loud boasts, but in honest work and true innovation. He, the former bully, is now working a much humbler job, slowly, painstakingly earning back trust, not just from others, but from himself. This story isn't just about Mark's downfall or my rise. It's a call to action for all of us, to look beyond the surface, to value genuine contribution in all its forms, and to remember that karma, in its own dramatic, sometimes slow, often ironic way, always finds a way to balance the scales. The loudest voices aren't always the smartest, and the quiet ones often hold the most profound power.